So with all the talk about guys like Brock Boeser and JT Miller and other players on the Vancouver Canucks whose names could enter the trade conversation, let's talk about two guys that are kind of in that mix too, oddly enough, but who really haven't had the same spotlight like a JT Miller or a Brock Boeser or a Bo Horvat has had over the years. We're coming over here with a few things from Thomas Drance and Rick Dhaliwal on The Athletic. We're also going over onto Donnie and Dolly and seeing what they have to say over there, because when it comes to these two sources, there are some very interesting conversations that are sparked up because of these that we're making a video about here today. So, we're going over onto a recent piece on The Athletic published by Rick Dhaliwal and Thomas Drance. Take a look at this piece right here, link will be in the description as always. Inside the start of a new Canucks regime, what's next for Boeser and trade deadline targets? This is from about a week ago, and I think we did actually make another video bringing this article up as a conversation piece, but there was indeed something mentioned in this piece that I thought was very noteworthy to bring up. Drance and Dhaliwal reporting contenders are interested in Schenn and Burroughs. High-ranking executives and cross-checking scouts have been at the Canucks' past two home games. The quote reads, "Both players may hold far more trade value than you might expect." Now, for Luke Schenn, this isn't a brand new conversation. We've made videos talking about how maybe the Leafs are interested in Schenn, how the Rangers potentially could be interested in Schenn as well. And that's a pretty easy conclusion to acknowledge here. He's a right-handed guy, big guy, physical, he can play defensively, he can do a pretty good job as a third-pairing defenseman, especially with that physical edge. That's something the Vancouver Canucks have lacked quite a bit over the past few years. But Kyle Burroughs is also in this conversation too, and the way the article groups these two names together makes a lot of sense to me. Kyle Burroughs, even though he isn't as big as Luke Schenn is, he's only 6 feet 194, everything else that Schenn can do, Burroughs can kind of also do. He's right-handed, he's physical, he fights, he goes out there, he does his job, and he can play a pretty alright shutdown game once in a while too. There's a lot of versatility with both Schenn and Burroughs in your lineup, and because Burroughs is a guy who, at 26 years old, is making $750,000 till the end of 2023, there is indeed a pretty good amount of value that I think this guy could have for any playoff team that's looking at the Vancouver Canucks and saying, yeah, that guy's a pretty alright depth piece. And so, when it comes to right-handed defensemen like Luke Schenn, we have already discussed about New York, we have discussed about Toronto. If there is a market for Schenn, there should be a market in turn for Burroughs, right? Even though Schenn has the star power behind his name, you know, he was a former top 10 pick, he was all this stuff with the Leafs and the Flyers, he was supposed to be a lot better than he really became. But, you know, two-time Stanley Cup champion as well, there still is that label to balance everything out too. Kyle Burroughs might not be exactly worth the same amount of value as a Schenn, just based off of those variables alone, but on ice, when it comes to the actual way the players play the game, I do think that they're a lot more similar than you could expect. So if scouts are coming over to Vancouver home games and scouting out both of these guys, makes a ton of sense to me. They're kind of in the same ballpark in that way. But the other conversation I wanted to talk about when it comes to unlikely Vancouver Canucks trade candidates comes in a different format. It's not a defenseman, it's not a guy who is suiting up as a bottom pairing player, just rotating in and around the lineup when you have other players like Hamonic and Hunt rotating too. We're talking about a forward on this team who's been really, really versatile. You want to talk about versatility, this is kind of the definition of versatility right here. Let's talk about Nils Hoglander. Because Rick Dhaliwal said this on yesterday's edition of Donnie and Dolly, a lot of teams are calling on Hoglander. The Canucks are not shopping him, and Dhaliwal does not see them moving him either. Now, why are teams calling on Nils Hoglander? Well, because he's 21 years old, because he's a small guy, because he's built like a fire hydrant, he's only 5'9", but he's 190 pounds. He's gone out there with legs of steel, he's a tree trunk, you can't shove this guy off the puck, or you can, but it's just really difficult. And he's on his entry-level deal, making $891,000 until the end of 2023. Hoglander is playing his second full season in the NHL, Last season, he had 27 points in 57 games played. This year, he's down there at 16 points in 48 games. He has sort of declined statistically, and he's on pace for 28 points in 81 games total, which is actually really cool. Elite Prospects added this new projected tab on their thing right here. That's amazing, dude. That's going to be so helpful for me. I don't have to do the math anymore over 82 games, but either way, Nils Hoglander has gone out here with a statistically worse season than he had last year. But I think there is a lot of growth that a lot of people have acknowledged within his game. We know that Bruce Boudreau went out there and highlighted his defensive play as something that he does need to work on in order for him to really transcend what he is right now and really fulfill his ceiling, which, in some people's opinion, could be a 25, 30-goal player. Others are a little bit less optimistic. But, of course, he is only 21 years old, so there is still a boatload of time for this guy to develop and eventually solidify those parts of his game. I will say that Hoglander today is a lot better than Hoglander was a few months ago, mostly because the line he's playing on is really, really creative and shifty. Like, this Podkolzin Hoglander PD line has been such a breath of fresh air when it comes to seeing the guys go out there create offense, and of course, Elias Pettersson finding his game back certainly helps in that respect too. But earlier on in the season, we were seeing Hoglander bounce around. You know, he's playing with Horvat sometimes, he's playing in the bottom of the lineup, cycling around with Lamico other times. It was really difficult to see Hoglander project because he wasn't really being given any consistency within the way he was being played. So now, on a line with PD and Pod, you can see the bromance between Hoglander and Podkolzin, these guys drafted together at the 2019 draft. It's awesome to see, and for me, taking a look at Hoglander and seeing what he's translated from the SHL into the NHL, probably the only thing I don't like out of that is his elbowing, because yeah, he was suspended a few times in the SHL for elbowing guys, and that is definitely the only part of his game that I think he wants to leave behind in Sweden, even though he did elbow a guy a few games ago in Vancouver. But the shiftiness, the creativity, the offensive production, I just can't wait to see that lacrosse goal, that Michigan. Even though Trevor Zegras got him beat, there still is an opportunity for Hoglander to go out there and do the thing. But teams are calling about this guy. Why? Because, as we noted, he's a young guy, probably has middle six, top six potential. He's still got himself a cheap contract, and he is capable at playing at the NHL level. He's on pace for around 14 goals, and any team looking at this kind of player would look at that and say, okay, yeah, like that's a helpful player. He could definitely be a useful addition on our team. But of course, Vancouver's not going to trade Hoglander. Why would they trade Hoglander? There's no reason to trade Hoglander. You want to talk about the things the Vancouver Canucks need to do? Firstly, they need to free up some cap space. Trading Hoglander does not do that. Secondly, they need to get younger. Trading Hoglander does not do that. This is pretty much going against anything the Vancouver Canucks would be trying to do, anything in Rutherford, Castonguay, Granato, and Alvin's plan. And so, yeah, Dhaliwal, he's got the right take over here, does not think the Canucks are shopping him, does not see the Canucks moving him. That is likely the best move possible. Even though a lot of teams might be going out there and calling on this guy, I'll say this right here. If you do trade Hoglander, the only reason you're going to do that is because the Vancouver Canucks are going to accept a price that makes you say, okay, wow, that's why they traded him. That return is so astronomically big that the Vancouver Canucks would have been foolish to turn that down. But of course, no NHL team goes out there and makes any trade proposals like that, so Hoglander is staying, unfortunately, for any team that wants him. So, talk to me in the comments, what do you think about these two unlikely trade conversations the Vancouver Canucks have apparently been a part of? Kyle Burroughs adding on to the Luke Schenn discourse we have seen. We also have Nils Hoglander here too. I think Burroughs is a lot more likely amongst these two players to get traded. Actually, if you want to include Schenn, Schenn is probably the most likely amongst the three in my opinion because of the star power that he has behind his name. But either way, do you think Kyle Burroughs is going to go? Do you think Schenn is going to go? If you do, where do you see them going and what do you see them going for? I think at the beginning of the year, a lot of people would have gone out there and said, okay, these guys aren't really worth too much. They're just extra players, depth cycling defensemen, you know, not really there in the lineup 82 games a year. And therefore, they're probably worth, let's say, future considerations plus a seventh or something. But they've been performing pretty well, and on a Vancouver Canucks decor that definitely could use a lot more stability. You know, Tucker Pullman is not going to be here every day doing the best that he can. Travis Hamonic is unreliable to show up as all heck, and as a result, we have had to see guys like Hunt and Juleson, yes, the other piece in the Olevi trade. We've had to see guys like Hunt and Juleson and Do we see Brisebois in a Canuck sweater this year yet? I'm not really too sure. It's a lot of cycling going around, and a lot of guys are actually sticking in here in a pretty solidified role. Schenn, Burroughs included. They're doing pretty well. Let me know in the comments what you think they could get in the trade market. I hope you enjoyed this video. 99. And bye.